Hey, my name is Jethro Sigers and you are on my YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed yet, make sure to do so because that's the only way to guarantee yourself to be notified when I post new videos. In one of the previous videos, I talked about multi-factor authentication, why it is important, how to set it up in Azure Active Directory and Office 365, and what the end user experience looked like. Today, we're going to go a little bit more in depth on how to customize and how to do it selectively. There's a lot of scenarios where you don't want to do multi-factor authentication. And in most cases, it's because your existing security is up to date or you have enough of other security mechanisms in place not to have to do multi-factor authentication. Let me give you an example. If your computer is domain joined and you have your security policies in place, there is no need for multi-factor authentication. It's just an additional layer that doesn't add enough value to the end user. You want to use multi-factor authentication when they're not domain joined, when they're in an area of the world where you normally wouldn't log in, or when they're using computers that you do not have under control. And that's what we're going to be focusing on. Today we're going to show you how to use conditional access with Azure Active Directory and how you can customize it that it's selective, that you don't need to use multi-factor authentication all the time. So let's get started. Okay, so in the first part of the demo, we're going to talk about the admin part. So what we're going to do is go to our Azure portal, so portal.azure.com, and we're going to our Azure Active Directory, which you can see over here. What we need to use is conditional access. Now, conditional access is a part of Azure Active Directory Premium, so you need to buy an additional license to get it. Now, we're going to show you that the additional cost is worth it because it gives you a lot of flexibility in your authentication process. So we're going into conditional access. And right here, I already created a policy, but let's just go through it to see what it does. Now, a conditional access policy consists out of a few parts. The first part, of course, is the name. Just make sure you have something that describes the policy so you are aware of what it does. Then you're going to define the user and groups where this policy is going to apply to. And right here, you can actually do an include and an exclude. So in my case, I've just used my own since it is a test. But in most cases, what you would do here is all users and exclude the people who are not going to be a part of that policy. Then you can define cloud apps. Which apps have you defined attached to your Azure Active Directory that you want this policy to be applying to? Then we have our conditions. In our conditions, we can define 4 types of conditions. First is the signing risk. With Azure Active Directory, there is always a signing risk assessment when somebody authenticates. For example, are there multiple failures followed by a success? That is, of course, going to trigger some kind of risk versus immediately authenticated. So that's one. The second one is the device platforms. So, for example, is this policy going to be applied on all the devices or all the platform or on a subset? And here you can define what platforms the policy need to apply to. The same for locations. You can include any location, exclude a number of locations, include all trusted locations, or select locations that you want, again, this policy to apply to. And the same goes for client apps. You can select client apps like browser, mobile apps, and Exchange ActiveSync. In my case, I want the policy to run on myself for each cloud app under all the conditions that I have defined. Okay, so once I've defined the assignments, now I can define the access controls. So you can define either a block access or a grant access. In my case, I want a grant access. And I want them to grant in case there's multi-factor authentication that isn't available, or when it is a domain joined computer. Now, what is very important is that it says hybrid Azure AD. Now, that means that your device, it's not enough that your device is domain joined with Azure Active Directory, which is pretty easy to do, but also locally domain joined. So in the demos that are following, I'm going to show you the difference between the two. But in short, only a computer that is domain joined on premises and with Azure AD is considered a domain joined computer in this setting. And then you have, how do you want the multiple controls to play out? I do not want to require all select controls because it is one or the other. Either it's domain joined and then they don't have to do multi-factor authentication, or it's not domain joined and then I do want multi-factor authentication. I can also customize my session controls. In this case, again, I don't need it. And again, here I'm going to enable the policy. Okay, so now I'm going to log in to my Surface Pro 3, who is Azure AD joined, but not local joined. So let's switch computers. Okay, so I switched computers to a computer that is Azure AD joined, but not local domain joined. Now, to get the status of the join, you can actually use this command here. Let me zoom in real quick. This is the command that you can run, and this gives you all this information on what the join is of that specific computer. So here I have Azure AD joined, yes, but it's no on domain joined. So that means there's no hybrid domain joined computer, right? So that is very important. If you don't know how this works, it's pretty easy to join your computer with Azure Active Directory as a user. You go to all settings, access work or school, and here you're going to see that this computer is joined with the JSolutions Azure AD. So that's enough. So if the policy works, I should be able to go to the Office 365 portal, fill in my username and password. And I should get a notification that multi-factor authentication is enabled, right? There we go. So I get a notification on my phone. The only thing I need to do now is approve this sign-in, and we're good to go. So let's see how this looks on a computer that is domain joined locally and has a user attached to Azure Active Directory. Okay, so I logged into my desktop computer right now, and what I'm going to do is do the same thing. My desktop computer is attached to a local domain, so let me run that same content again. And right now, you're going to see that I am Azure AD joined, so I run the same query here. But now I see domain joined is yes plus the domain name. So according to Azure Active Directory, this is a hybrid domain joined computer. So I'm going to authenticate with my username, fill in my password, and if all goes well, my mailbox should appear without any request for multi-factor authentication. So here we go. Here we go. So I don't get request for multi-factor. Instead, it asks me if I want to stay in or stay signed in. So you see the difference between the two, where with the Surface Pro 3, which was not domain joined, I do need to do multi-factor authentication, and which with this device that is domain joined, both on a local domain and on Azure AD, I don't need to do it. So That's the thing with conditional access. You can customize your authentication flow and add additional requirements based on the main joint, based on the location, based on which application they're using, and really fine-tune your authentication process to reduce the complexity for the end user, but at the same time without compromising the security. So if you like this video, make sure to subscribe on my YouTube channel. And if you have any requests or any comments, feel free to leave them in the comments below.